Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Houston, the Executive Director of the Wolf River Conservancy. Let me welcome you all to tonight's lecture, which is part of our ongoing educational outreach to the community. We're very excited about sharing tonight's program featuring Christopher Grow of Grow Environmental Solutions. But first, I would like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that the Conservancy is hosting a full moon bonfire on October 26th, as well as our first Saturday paddle on the always favorite Ghost River section of the Wolf River on November 2nd. Please see our website, wolfriver.org, for RSVP and registration information. I would also like to acknowledge all of our benefactors for 2024. They are the Crawford Howard Family Foundation, TC Energy, Bank of America, AutoZone, FedEx, the Hyde Family Foundation, Buckman, International Paper, Jim Karras Subaru, Terminex, Ring Container Technologies, Brother International Corporation, First Horizon Foundation, and Silvamo. Thank you for their ongoing support. Of course, all of our supporters, corporations, individual donors, and volunteers are critically important in allowing us to deliver on our mission, the protection and enhancement of the Wolf River watershed as a sustainable natural resource. As always, gifts of any size are appreciated. Please see our website at www.wolfriver.org/give. And finally, a few housekeeping details. We ask that you do not attempt to record this program with any device. If you have questions during the program, please use the Q&A feature and not the chat box. Our education director, Kathy, will be monitoring the questions and will ask them after the program. Now, it's my pleasure to present to you our speaker for this evening, Mr. Christopher Grow. Mr. Grow has over 18 years of experience in the ecological and environmental fields with various private and public sector entities. He has extensive and broad field experience with wildlife through various surveys, including threatened and endangered species surveys. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Christopher Grow.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate the intro, and as always, thank you, Wolf River Conservancy, for having me out to talk about one of my favorite species, or at least genre, is bats. So bats make up a small workload in the environmental field for me. I function as a biologist, a ecologist. I'm a professional wetland scientist as well by trade. But I love doing bat surveys. I love going out, being in the field, being active, and seeing what I can catch, see what I can do in terms of threatened and endangered species. So with that, let me pull up this PowerPoint. If it'll go. Well, let's don't start at the end. Let's start at the beginning. All right. So bats. Given this talk many different times, and it's constantly evolving as bats become more and more endangered. So to start out, since I've already given you a little background on me, I kind of want to ask the question. So poll one, you want to pull that one up, kind of start this talk, is what is a bat? So is it a mammal? Is it a chordate? Is it a winged animal? Or is it all of the above? Kind of see what y'all know about bats. Am I supposed to be able to see these results, Natalie? I hate to ask you, but
I sure thought so, but I can tell you what they are.
yeah, why don't you tell me, because it's not showing on my end, because I don't
Sure thing. Well, I 20% of the group said that bats are mammals,
Okay.
and then 80% of the group said all of the above.
Awesome. All right. So 80% are correct. A bat is all of the above. So a bat is part of the kingdom Animalia, so it's an animal. It's in the phylum Chordata, so it has a chordate, so a spine, it has a vertebrate. It's in the class Mammalia, so it is a mammal. And it's under the order Chiroptera, or winged mammals. It's the second largest order of mammals, so 1/5 of all mammals are bats. So 1,200 species worldwide, that's approximate, because I'm sure there's more, are bats. 47 of those we currently have here in the US. So let's see. Go ahead and pull up poll 2. So we're going to ask what is a mammal, but I got a couple one more question before we go to that. Bats are oviparous. Young birth via eggs. True or false?
And I think I've figured it out. So you should be able to see it here shortly. I'm going to end the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Share results.
Awesome. False. That is correct. So bats are viviparous, so they give live birth. So since they are a mammal, they are vertebrates, so they have a spine just like all of us. They're endothermic, so they regulate their own body temperature, just like humans. They have hair, just like us. Dolphins fall in that category too. They're also mammals. But they have live birth and they feed their young milk. So they are a mammal. So we're talking about the bat biology a little bit. We're going to go through its lifespan and its reproduction. Lifespan on average is 30 years. I have had the privilege when I first started working with bats. We used bands, to track bats, and the old school bands were plastic and they actually pierced through the wing. And now they just clamp on. They don't injure the bat as much. But I remember catching a bat, and they had the data. It was at Arnold Air Force Base. They had the data for many, many years, and we caught a bat that hit 40 years old. So I mean, the odds of bats living that longer, getting above 30 is not as common. But 30 years is a long time for such a small mammal. You think about mice and having a lifespan, of 1 to 3 years, even that, because of predators. Bats don't have as many predators because they're flying. So their average lifespan is longer at 30 years. Reproduction, gestation period is usually 40 days to 6 months. Some of the bigger bats, which most of the bats we have in the US are not that big, but bigger bats have longer gestation periods. They usually have one pup because, you can see in this picture here of this eastern red bat. One pup alone is 25% of a mother's weight. Now, it's not unheard of for them to have two. This mom here had two, but that's a lot. That takes up a lot of her body. So they're raised in maternity colonies. So one of the big things, and we'll talk about protection status of some of these species, but maternity colonies are one of the top priority colonies to preserve and protect when it comes to bats. So their diet, insects, 70% of the population are insect eaters. We also have fruit-eating bats, nectar-eating bats, fish, reptiles, and other mammals, bats that eat all those things. And then, of course, the infamous vampire bats that eat blood. So let's pull up poll 3. And that question is, how many insects an hour does a bat eat? 10,000, 1,000, 500, or 20,000?
All right. Give everyone about 10 more seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, so we got 10,000. We got a good little mix, 500, 10,000, 1,000. Of course, the majority wins. That answer is about 1,000 insects an hour. It can range from 1,000 to 1,500. Who really is counting how many bugs they eat? Let's be real. They do eat a lot though per bat per hour. So if you think about a bat, it's a keystone species for our ecology and our habitat, especially being here in Memphis. The walk outside in the summertime, you're bound to get swept away by mosquitoes. And just think about how many insects and mosquitoes that we have that bug you every day in Memphis, and we have bats everywhere. People, when I do this talk for kids and stuff, they're, oh, we don't have bats here. And I'm like, I don't think you understand. The more insects we have, the more mosquitoes we have, the more bats we have. So the Mississippi River, especially the Delta, is some of the highest concentrated areas of bats, especially insect-eating bats. And just think, you're still getting carried away almost every time you go outside. And imagine if there were no bats. I mean, they probably literally would carry us away. There'd be so many. Same thing with cockroaches and moths and spiders. So bats are a keystone species in our environment. I always love doing this slide, especially when I do talks for some of the schools. But where are bats located? So, of course, bats are found everywhere in the world. Um, and usually I ask this question to kids. I'm like, where would you not find them? Well, we know that 70% of the population eats insects, so you're going to find them where there's no bugs. Well, the only place you're going to find that is where it's cold. So in the Arctic and Antarctic regions, you won't find bats. You're pushing the limits when you get up in northern Canada. Insects are bad up there, but when you get towards the tundra type environments, that kind of teeters off. But bats are found on every continent across the world, and except getting into the Arctic. So anywhere it's not cold. All right, so where do bats live? In a minute, we're going to talk about the types of bats because that does factor into the type of habitat that they utilize. Um, but on this slide here, bats utilize trees. Um, Up in the top left corner here, this picture is flying foxes down the Mariana Islands. Utilize trees to sleep during the day, a really big bat. But these two pictures here, I love incorporating pictures that I actually take and that I get hands-on experience with. But these, during the summer months, I get a lot of phone calls for bats that have been found dehydrated or in somebody's driveway or maybe on the bricks of their house. So this bat was suffering pretty bad. He was dehydrated, hadn't eaten. So we brought him back home. Of course, my kids love it. We feed the bat and keep him watered and keep him for a couple of days. And sure enough, this is at the YMCA Newbur off Quince. They actually have some shagbark trees back there. And shagbark, it's really common in Middle Tennessee, a little less common the more you get in West Tennessee, but they have some shagbark. And so we put this bat on the tree, and he slowly moved his way underneath the bark. And that kid's a prime example. Being in West Tennessee, we don't have cave systems. You got to get into middle and East Tennessee, east of the Tennessee River, or going into the Ozarks where you actually start getting to more karst terrain. So a lot of these bats that live in our area utilize trees just like this red bat is doing. Underneath loose pieces of bark and cracks and crevices, they love dead trees. So trees are a big one in the Memphis area for bats to utilize. But everybody thinks of a bat, you think of, well, where do they live? And everybody's going to tell you caves. So yes, these top two pictures are gray bats. This is in Middle Tennessee, and some cave systems up that way. Bats that utilize caves are a more specialist species. Okay, they require that constant temperature year round for them to survive. Versus looking at the eastern red bat that was utilizing a tree, eastern red bats are more of a generalist species. They can adapt. They can fly to another tree. They can find something else. They can also utilize caves. So caves are a big one, especially for threatened and endangered species, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. Down in the bottom left, these are big brown bats. They also utilize bridges. So these are big browns. It's in Memphis. I'm not going to tell you where because that wouldn't be fair to the bats because everybody's going to want to go look. But it is underneath the bridge. They utilize those cracks and crevices in bridges as well. And I'm sure everybody's heard of the bats in Austin that utilize the bridges and stuff as well. The bottom right corner, this is Rafinesky's big-eared bat. More common to East Tennessee. We do have some populations here in West Tennessee, and these are actually taken here in West Tennessee in a barn. So they do utilize barns and attics and homes because they want the heat. So when the wintertime comes, trees are great and all, but if they don't have this right amount of sun they need, they'll migrate to things that do. And so that's why in this area we find a lot of bats that end up on the side of brick houses during the winter because it's warm and they attract that. So I got a little video here. I like this one. A buddy of mine had a bat infestation in his attic. and I want you to kind of, it's a little blurry because it was taken in the dark. He had about 40 big brown bats that infested his attic. He didn't know about it until ceilings started falling through. So the shadow you see here in the back is bat guano or bat poop. And then all the bats are up here on the little vented part of the attic. So here, I'll play this video. You can see all the bats there hanging. So this is what happens when bats move towards your house, or at least find it more accessible. That's why it's important to keep all these areas. And there's guano right there. That's a lot of bat poop. Bat poop's great for many things. You know, it constitutes, well, I think it's 75% of the makeup industry, as far as making mascara and different foundations and stuff. But bat guano, when exposed to it long periods of time, can cause respiratory problems. So having them in your house is not such a great idea. That's why we have different wildlife companies that can come in and remove those. But they're attracted to the heat. That's why they come in. All right, bat anatomy. So we're going to cover the different parts of a bat and what's the most important parts. Of course, the whole bat itself is important, but there are things that are a little more important. So a bat is structured similar to a human as far as, you know, the body parts, just arranged differently. We're not in person, but I always like to try when I do this talk to kids. It's a good analogy is think about your body, think about your arms, okay? And we're looking at the forearm here. All right, and then they have the upper arm. So the upper arm is their bicep, okay? That's going to be your bicep. So it's short, all right? And their forearm is really, really long. So imagine if your forearm was just super long. All right, and at the end of that forearm is a thumb, all right? So if you were to stick your arm out, their thumbs are up and their fingers are down, all right? And there's a webbing between all their fingers. So their first, their second and third finger are bound together, and then they have their fourth finger and then their fifth finger. And then, of course, you got your thumb over here. All right, so that winged membrane is what allows them to fly. It allows them to catch air. They also have feet. Bats do have knees. And they have a tailed membrane. So that tailed membrane functions just like it would on a plane or even a boat, kind of like a rudder. It helps them steer when they're flying. But one of the most important parts of a bat is its ears. Okay, so this bat here is honestly a big-eared bat. As you'll see, most of the bats that we have are a smaller-eared bat. But this one's great because you can see the actual ear. Inside that ear or in front of that ear towards its eye is a tragus. So just like we have our ears, our earlobes, okay, we have a tragus, a small one. They have a really long, pointed one. Some are pointed, some are more rounded. All play a different role in the ear type and how well they can echolocate. So the ears are going to be, in my opinion, besides flying, besides the wings, are the most important part of a bat because without them, they can't capture prey. They can't detect objects. So ears, in my opinion, are some of the most important. And the last one that I think is also important are the feet. People don't really think of the feet, but how does a bat sleep? It doesn't sleep standing up, right? I don't know if anybody's seen the funny videos where people turn the video upside down. It looks like bats are dancing. But bats don't stand up. Vampire bat's the only exception where it can use its front forearms to crawl on. But bats, their feet are the most important. They can fall asleep upside down. That's how they roost. The reason for that is it allows them to escape predators really fast. All right. So if they're up underneath a piece of bark hanging by their feet, their wings are wrapped up like a blanket. All they got to do is let go and then take off. So those feet are important. Those feet got to be strong. And I've actually had this past summer, I had a lady who called me and said, "Hey, there's a bat hanging on my bush. I don't want to go touch it. It's alive, but it hasn't moved." And I got there, and the bat, its feet are so strong that it died in place. It looked like it got attacked, probably by an owl, since an owl is one of the number one predators in this area for bats because they're both nocturnal. But its feet had gripped on so hard to that bush that the bat just died, and its body just stayed hanging there. So their feet, ears, and wings are some of the most important. Well, let's go to poll 4. So do bats truly fly or do they glide? So when we say truly fly, we're thinking of birds, okay? We're thinking of actually using force to keep themselves up.
All right. Few more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, so majority again, 70% said fly, 30% said glide. So the answer is fly. So bats are truly flying mammals. They're the only winged flying mammal. Another mammal that a lot of people think flies is the southern flying squirrel or northern flying squirrel. They don't fly, they technically glide. They also are membraned, and they are bane of my existence during survey season because they're also nocturnal, and I catch a lot of them. You would not think that, hey, flying squirrel's not that common. I catch at least 3 or 4 every season. And if imagine if you took a squirrel and put it in like a dip net or some kind of net, a really fine net, and it's like giving your kid fishing line and just tangle it up. It's a mess. And they're vicious and they love to bite. So I don't like talking about them. But they are true gliders, and bats are true flyers. All right. Oops. All right, so we talked about ears being the most important, so that's going to lead me to my next slide, which is echolocation. So bats utilize echolocation to fly at night, to track down prey, to detect objects. A lot of people get confused with sonar and echolocation. They are not the same. All right, echolocation is what animals use, okay, and sonar is what humans use, sound navigation and ranging. Okay, usually more on a mechanical and technical standard is sonar. Echolocation is utilized by bats, but I'm going to pull up poll 5 before we watch this video. You able to get poll 5 up, Natalie? There we go. So what other animal uses echolocation? We know bats do. Is it ants, dolphins, monkeys, or snakes?
Few more seconds. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Awesome. That was a good one. Everybody said dolphins. That is correct. Dolphins do use echolocation. So bats and dolphins are similar in that nature, that they use echolocation to detect many different objects. So let's watch this video on echolocation. I think it's a good one. I like it because kids understand as well as adults alike. And it talks about not only just echolocation, but how that sound works via the Doppler effect, how it bounces off objects. Bats do make noise. They do make echolocation clicks that you can hear at our frequency. But when it comes to them flying and actually hunting, all those sounds are at a high frequency that we cannot hear.
How do bats see? Well, there are 2 types of bats in the world. Megabats, such as fruit bats, navigate mainly by sight, and microbats, which live in dark places, navigate using echolocation. They use their ears to see by listening for echoes. Bats can emit ultrasonic sounds, sounds at frequencies higher than the human ear can detect. Then they listen for the returning echoes that bounce off obstacles or prey and use them to navigate or hunt for food. A bat's call can range all the way up to 160 kilohertz, a frequency 8 times higher than humans can hear. Once they detect the prey, they will raise the frequency of calls even higher. If the wavelength of sound wave is bigger than the size of prey, sound waves can be considered to directly pass them. A higher frequency results in a shorter wavelength, so that the sound will reflect when it reaches the prey. You know how sound reflects similarly to the way light does? When microbats receive echoes, they can process several pieces of information at the same time, such as the Doppler shift. For example, the flapping wings of an insect create periodic compressions of molecules in the air. If the prey is flying toward the bat, frequency of the echoes is higher than the frequency of the sound that the bat sent. And if the prey is flying away from the bat, frequency of the echoes is lower than the frequency sent. This is the Doppler effect, so they can distinguish whether a fly is in motion or at rest. By knowing the duration from the time it shouted till its own echo is heard. Bats can determine how much time is needed to reach a prey.
All right. So when it comes to echolocation, part of my job is not only just surveying to try to actually capture bats, but we have an option of doing acoustics, where we actually collect calls from bats and are able to identify them by species. So how we do that is using an Anabat system. So Anabat's been around for quite some time. When I first started doing bat work back in 2006, they were just developing this sound library. It's very similar, as we were talking earlier with Kathy and them, is that it's similar to the Merlin ID app that you get on your phone, where you're able to ID bird species. The Anabat system is able to identify bats to species based on the frequency of their calls. So this piece of equipment here takes those ultrasonic sound waves, those high frequency calls, and brings them down to a kilohertz that we can hear. And we're able to run that through some software. And what it does, I want to say it's 100% accurate. It's not always. We do run off probability. And so anything that's 90% or greater is usually that species. We also go through and manually vet these calls. And so we can actually see the calls on an actual graph and can determine whether or not that species is a big brown bat or an eastern red bat. I had these sound clips here, and we tried to test it beforehand. Apparently, it plays on my end, but nobody else can hear it. But they were some bat calls. Sounds like static, sounds like clicking. But the biggest thing I wanted to point out is during echolocation, we heard about the Doppler effect. Bats emit a lot more calls when they're flying through a forested area versus a field area. I mean, the reason for that is there's nothing for anything to bounce off of. So they know when they're in a field, they don't call as much, and they know when they're in a forest, they call more, so they don't hit a tree. Same thing when hunting prey. They're going to emit more clicks if they're on the track of a mosquito or another bug, and less clicks if there's no bugs around. So the point of me playing those sounds was so you could hear the difference and kind of identify, well, are they in a forest or a field? Are they hunting something or are they not? But the Anabat system is pretty cool. Even if my clients don't want to do acoustics and they want me to just do mistnet surveys to actually capture bats, I still put it out because I think it's cool just to see what else is out there, because you don't capture everything. And it's interesting to see what else is flying around. I use it at my house quite a bit, actually, just because I'm curious all the time. All right, so types of bats. So as you heard in that video, there are two main types of bats. There's microbats, all right, which are going to be like your insect-eating bats. There are some fruit-eating bats, nectar-eating bats. All those fall under microbats. Your microbats have really tiny eyes. All right, they're not. They're tiny, really small. Versus the megabats are much bigger, and you can see here, eyeballs are much, much bigger. So that's going to lead me let's see, is that poll 6? Let's pull that one up first before I spill the beans. But are bats truly blind? Yes or no?
All right.
All right, so majority is right again. So no, bats actually have excellent vision, if not better than 2020. The problem is they're nocturnal. Bats can fly at day. That's why I usually find them a lot at dusk. Those bats that are actually flying at dusk aren't necessarily using echolocation. They can see really well. But a bat being out during the day, because their eyes are so tiny, when I was a kid, I used to have a magnifying glass and loved to magnify the sun and catch stuff on fire. It's like that for a bat. Their eyes are so small that sun just burns their eyes. And so, being out in the day is not good for a bat. So at night, dusk, they use their eyesight more, but when it gets pitch black, they switch that echolocation. It's easier for them to navigate. So microbats are all over the world, and that's all we have in the U.S. Megabats are more tropical areas with fruit. Megabats eat fruit, and we don't have fruit trees here unless you are growing them, but they don't naturally occur in the U.S. unless you get some of the more southern, get into Texas and Florida maybe, but we don't have flying foxes. It's well outside their range. You get into South America, get on the Mariana Islands, you're more likely to run into your bigger fruit-eating bats. So we're going to talk about microbats. So the types of microbats. I got a little picture of each, I guess, type of microbat that there is. We have some that eat fish, like the fish-eating Myotis. We have some that eat nectar, like this nectar-eating bat here. And if you pay attention to some of the features on these bats, you'll see how they have adapted to feeding off such. As the nectar-eating bat's got a really, really long tongue. Its rostrum is also pretty narrow. So it's adapted to feed off flowers. It's a really ugly bat. I took this one down in Colima, Mexico. This is a ghost face bat, mainly because you can't really tell where its face is. But it's an insect-eating bat. It's got a really flat face. Its face isn't good for really anything besides just eating insects.
Face isn't really good for it.
And then we got the amphibian eating bats. So there's bats that eat amphibians, that eat reptiles, snakes, mammals. So more on your carnivorous side. And then, of course, we got the infamous vampire bat. All right, so let's see. Let's go to poll 7 before I talk about the vampire bat. Do vampire bats suck human blood? Yes or no?
All right, just about everybody's in. So I'm going to end the poll. Speak now.
That is correct. No, vampire bats do not suck human blood. Usually I'd follow up with another question and be like, well, what do they eat? But I'm going to answer that for you. So vampire bats mainly feed on livestock. So cows, goats, sheep, those kinds of things. And when I ask this question to the kids, they're always like, oh, they killed the whole cow. Well, that wouldn't do the vampire bat any good. All right, so vampire bats are special that they can, I wouldn't say attack, but they land on the livestock. They use their teeth and their tongue to make a little slit. They lap up whatever the blood they need. And of course, they want that animal to live because it's its food supply, and their saliva acts as a band-aid. It seals that right up. And so unless they're carrying a disease, which, 1 to 2% of bats carry rabies, so very small, but unless they're carrying a disease, it doesn't technically harm the livestock they're eating. So a big myth, vampire bats do not suck your blood. All right, now we talked about the types of microbats. We're going to focus on bats of the Mid-South, which here in the Mid-South is just insect-eating bats. We don't have vampire bats here. Mainly those are in Central America. All right, so on this slide, we got us a big brown bat here and eastern red bat here. Eastern red bat is my favorite bat. We'll talk about those here in a minute. But in Tennessee, so remember there's 47 species in the U.S., and of those 47, 16 have been known to occur here in Tennessee. That doesn't necessarily mean that all those occur here in Memphis. Some of those are going to be rare, threatened, or endangered. But here in Memphis, we have 11 out of the 16. And the more east you go, we don't find as many. We may find more specialist bats because we have more cave systems, but a much greater diversity here in the I don't want to say Mid-South, but in the Mississippi Delta because there's more insects. So of those 16, of those 11, we have 4 that are common, 4 that are uncommon. And when I say uncommon, doesn't mean they're threatened or endangered. They are high flyers, so very hard to catch. They love eating off moss at the tops of trees. Some are more evasive. It could be low ground feeders. But so 4 common, 4 uncommon, 2 are endangered, and of course 1 is recently proposed for listing, and we're going to talk about that later on in the talk. All right, so let's talk about each species. I'm going to start with my favorite, which is Laziurus borealis, the eastern red bat. As you can tell, it's a little different than all the other bats you've seen. It's orange. It's very hairy. I like to call it Chewbacca of the night because it looks like Chewbacca if he was orange. Very hairy. All these bats, as you see and we go through, have very similar weights. Okay, so there's different features to these, as you see, that make them easy to identify, and some that are hard. We use different features to identify that species of bat. So it weighs between 8 and 14 grams, got a wingspan of 29 to 33 centimeters. All this is hard to really visualize unless you had it in front of you or a scale or a ruler. So overall, bats are pretty small. Most bats are about a little smaller than your hand, maybe just your palm. Not much bigger than that. So the eastern red bat spends daylight hours in the foliage of trees. As you can see, it's orange. So this time of year is awesome for the eastern red bat. He can go out there, hang out on a limb, blends right in with the trees, with the leaves. He looks like a leaf. So it's good camouflage against predators. Seldom enters caves, but they do know to forage around caves. And they commonly feed beneath streetlights in towns. So the eastern red bat and the next one I'm about to talk about are the two most common here in Memphis. If you were to go out for a walk here in the city during the summer months and you see street lights and there's a lot of bugs and you see something fluttering around kind of erratic, that's usually a bat. If it's nice and smooth, it's usually a barn swallow or a purple martin. So bats are really erratic. So they feed on moss, crickets, flies, mosquitoes, beetles, and cicadas. And like I said, they're common throughout its distribution. If I had to pick one or two species that I catch in almost every state, it's going to be the eastern red bat. And then this next one, which is the big brown bat. So the big brown bat's larger in scale. It's a little bit bigger than the eastern red bat. Just like the name, it's big, it's brown, it's got a blackish face. I mean, whatever scientists named this was just, they thought really hard about this name. Weighs between 11 and 23 grams, 32 to 35 centimeter wingspan. It's most associated with human activity. So if we had to talk about species that are generalist and specialist, the big brown bat is a very generalist species. It can live anywhere. It does not care if you're sitting on the front porch, it's going to fly over your head. It may land on the brick next to you. It doesn't care. It loves human activity. So it roosts in attics, barns, bridges, other man-made structures, nightly roost under porches, loves the brick on houses to keep warm, open garages, and breezeways. So similar to the last bat, of course, it feeds on beetles, ants, flies, mosquitoes, mayflies, and stoneflies, and again, common throughout its range. So the big brown and eastern red, if you saw a bat flying, you could say big brown and 50-50 on being right. They're that common. There's a nice close-up of big brown. I think they kind of look like a wolf or, a dog. They have the nice rounded rostrum. You can see the ears here are more short and rounded. The tragus is more rounded, not as pointy as some of the others we saw, but they have some really large canines, and these really do hurt. All right, my next favorite one, it would be the Nycticius humoralis, which is the evening bat. It's smaller. It's actually a little smaller than the eastern red bat, about the same size. But it's more dark brown to black in color. The evening bat is what Batman was really modeled after. Has a weight of 7 to 14 grams. It's 26 to 28 centimeters wingspan. It likes buildings and cavities and trees, so it kind of fluctuates between human activity and forested areas. But it loves loose bark on dead trees. Again, it consumes a wide variety of insects, most likely beetles, moths, mosquitoes, and crickets. And again, it is common throughout the southeastern U.S. However, I can tell you from all the netting and surveying I've done, I haven't caught one in quite some time. And I don't know if there's a decline or if they're just a little more invasive than some of the other species. And you're going to hear me say this a lot. I have a lot of different favorites. I love the eastern red bat, but when it comes to like the trophy bat that you can catch, it would be this one, the hoary bat, Lazarus cinereus. It's tan and brown to black, and it's gray to white frosted tips. I think it's a very unique bat as far as coloration goes. Completely furred under the arms, including the tail. This is probably the biggest bat you will find here in the Mid-South. It's bigger than the big brown bat. So it weighs between 17 and 35 grams, has a pretty good wingspan of 38 to 41 centimeters. So it spends its daylight hours in the foliage. So you'll see that these red bats, hoary bat is a type of red bat. It's got the Lazarus genus name, so it's a type of red bat. But those furry bats that have that nice orange color and the different color variations, you'll see that they love to hang out on tree limbs, especially with leaves, because they blend. Predators find that hard to find. Rarely utilizes abandoned buildings. This bat loves to fly high. So when I say it's a trophy bat to catch, when I say high, some of my net systems go 30 to 40 feet, and it's hard to catch them then. I've caught at least one every season, and it's always fun to catch them. So it is uncommon because it's such a high flyer. There's a nice little close-up of a hoary bat. All right, we're going to go into some of the more uncommon ones now that we've hit hoary bat. We're going to go to Lasiurus seminolis, or the Seminole bat. It is dark, more of a mahogany in color compared to the eastern red bat. Eastern bat's more orange. This is more of a dark red. Got some frosted tips. It's about the same size as an eastern red. It's 9 to 14 grams, 29 to 33 centimeter wingspan. Loves roosting in trees with Spanish moss. So while we do get this bat, can happen on occasion. We'll get them up into the Memphis area. It's more common the further south you go. So Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. Think of the Panhandle and the Gulf. Anywhere you got Spanish moss, this bat is a lot more common. Eats flies, mosquitoes, beetles, and crickets. All right, this is another red bat species, Lazanicterus noctivagans, or silver-haired bat. I like to think of it as similar to the silverback gorilla. It's just a really small version. It's got the nice silver pattern on its back. Same size as the other eastern reds, 8 to 11 grams. Got a wingspan of 27 to 31 centimeters. Loves loose bark, woodpecker holes, and birds' nests. Can also utilize open sheds in garages and buildings. It also likes to fly high, so it's also harder to find. It's also very evasive. Eats moss, flies, mosquitoes, termites, and beetles. So it's rare throughout most of its range, including the southeastern U.S. But there have been records of it here in the Mid-South. All right, Rafinesky's big-eared bats. The next one, Corionorinus rafinesky. Obviously, the distinguishable feature here is its ear, the large pin on the tragus, with light to dark brown or gray fur. Overall, fairly small, fairly light bat, 8 to 14 grams. Got a 26 to 30 centimeter wingspan. Summer roost in buildings, so it loves barns, old sheds, that kind of thing. Loves tree hollows. Chooses more open and lighted day roosts than other species and feeds primarily on moths and other insects. So it's uncommon throughout its range. In the state of Tennessee, it's deemed in need of management. Most of the natural populations occur in East Tennessee. You do get some migratory bats that do make their way this direction. And so we do have some isolated populations in West Tennessee. And to kind of harp on that, I haven't been out there in a while. We do have a location out there in Shelby Forest when I was at the University of Memphis that had maybe 40. Just this picture here, maybe about 40 of these Rafineskis, and they were working on making that barn more suitable. And I think they ended up getting up to 400 or more Rafineskis bigger bats that would utilize that barn. So doing habitat adjustments, especially for species that utilize something man-made, can be beneficial. And we'll talk about that when we get down to things that you can do for bats. All right, one of our last uncommon species before we get into threatened and endangered is the southeastern myotis, the Myotis austraparius. So it's light to dark brown or gray fur, and it's got a short, thick, and woolly appearance. The myoid species, we don't have many here because most of the myoid species are cave-dwelling species. So we don't run into many of those in this area. But when we do, most of the myoid species are small, myoid meaning mouse-like. So the ears, they look like a mouse with wings. As you can tell by the weight, 5 to 8 grams, that's pretty light. The 24 to 27 centimeter wingspan, but there's different features that, besides weight and wingspan, that would distinguish the species. And one of those is the calcar. So earlier we talked about the anatomy. I don't think I pointed out the calcar, but where the tail membrane meets the foot, there's a piece of cartilage that comes off that ankle. And that piece of cartilage is the calcar. And if it's keeled, it'll be flattened and hard. It won't be soft like the membrane. It's flexible, but it's harder than the membrane. Or it'll be not keeled, which means it's just rounded. It's not flattened. And so it's a big feature for the southeastern myotis. Loves human habitations and structures such as attics, bridges, and mines. Likes loose bark and tree hollows. Again, eats the same type of insect. Uncommon throughout its range, but it's relatively common west of the Tennessee River. So getting into our area, again, it's just one of those species that is harder to catch and is deemed in need of management in the state of Tennessee. When I say deemed in need of management, a lot of people think, well, the species must be in decline. Not necessarily. Deemed in need of management means we don't have enough data. Not enough of them have been caught. And so that's something that, Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency does in the state of Tennessee is they're always constantly going sampling, trying to access other people's properties so they can sample more and collect more data. So deed and data management doesn't necessarily mean a population's on the decline. It just means we don't have enough data. All right, so this is where my specialty comes in. I do have a federal permit with Fish and Wildlife Service to conduct these threatened and endangered species surveys. So in this area, in the Mid-South, Myotis sedalis, the Indiana bat, is one of those species. And so the Indiana bat, it's been listed since March 11th, 1967, when the first provision of the Endangered Species Act was formed. It was the first one to go on the list. Its fur is pinkish brown to gray brown. The big thing here is the skin around its eyes is pinkish. There's not a lot of hair around its eyes. Its calcar is slightly keeled. So if you look at this bottom right picture, here's the calcar coming off this foot. All right, and it's slightly flattened. You can kind of see this area here is flattened and not really round. And it has sparse toe hairs. So yes, we even look at toe hairs when it comes to some of these bat species. One of them is the small-footed bat and little brown bat. Got to count toe hairs. Who would have thought you can count a species from the toe hairs? Primarily a cave rooster during the winter months. So from October to April, spends its summers in forested stands, especially things that have bark, cracks, crevices, and standing snags. And as the other bats, eats moss, mosquitoes, and hard, soft-bodied insects. You'll see a lot of these cave-dwelling bats utilize the cave during the winter months because the temps are stable, and then they expand out into the forested areas during the summer. Indiana bat, another one is gray bat. We're not going to talk about it here because we don't have it in the Mid-South, but the gray bat is listed as endangered in Middle Tennessee because it is a cave obligate. It loves caves. You will not rarely find it roosting anywhere else except in a cave. It will forage over creeks. But there are bats, especially some of these cave dwellers, do migrate. They will go from their cave dwelling areas, their winter habitats, to summer roost habitats. And so occasionally we will get Indiana bats down here in the Mid-South. Even though they prefer caves, we do get some transitory bats. So abundance, again, it's endangered. Population totals right now are less than 400,000. Probably even less than that with white nose syndrome, which we'll discuss later on things that impact bats. All right, so Myotis septentrionalis, the northern long-eared bat. So I started doing bats in 2006. This bat was common. I mean, you could count on catching it about as much as an eastern red bat, especially in Middle Tennessee. It's medium to dark brown on the back. It's got pale brown on the underside, but its ears extend past its muzzle. So if you were to fold these ears down, you can see it right here. It's already going past its muzzle. So that's where it gets the long-ear name from. It weighs 6 to 7 grams, 22 to 26 centimeter wingspan. Primarily a cave roosting bat, but just like Indiana bat, during the summer, it loves trees, exfoliating bark, cracks, and crevices, as well as standing snags and buildings. So, been doing this since 2006, and over time, it's been less and less of catching northern long-eared bat. So as of 2015, it was listed as threatened. It was proposed and then listed as threatened in May 2015 due to declines from white nose syndrome. But recently in 2022 was listed as endangered. So obviously huge population decline for this species. All right, this is going to be the most recent one. A lot of us that do bat work have had to revise our permits to tentatively cover the tricolored bat, or Perimyotis subflavus. This one's interesting because it's a Myotis species, but it almost got the same coloring as an eastern red bat. It's brown to reddish, and it's got 3 different colors. If you were to blow on its back, it's got brown to reddish or pale gray. The roots are dark, midsection's pale, and the tips are brown. It's about the same size as eastern red. It's 5 to 8 grams. It's got a wingspan of 21 to 26 centimeters. Loves roosting in trees during the summer, but has no problem utilizing caves during the winter. Feeds over waterways and at forest edges, mainly eats beetles, mosquitoes, midges, and ants. Like I said, it was once common throughout its range. I've actually, back in 2017, over near Chuckalissa, we were doing some work for a client, and we actually captured, I think, 4 tricolored bats, and also over by the airport here in Memphis. So it's some of the only two populations of tricolored bats in the Memphis area in quite some time. But now it's being currently proposed to be listed as endangered. They're not even listed as threatened. It's been affected so badly, they're going straight to endangered. And it's not legally listed yet, but after getting my permit recently with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, it's already gone out of public notice. It will be listed. There's no maybe. It's going to be listed as endangered. Just a matter of time when that final notice comes out. Another close up of the tricolored bat, the pink arms, the dark membrane. All right, let's see. All right, so why are bats threatened and endangered? All right, so originally when the Endangered Species Act came about, the biggest thing was development. So residential, commercial, industrial developments were the biggest thing. Deforestation, habitat fragmentation led to loss of suitable habitat. And then, development didn't worry about cave systems. They needed rock, they'd harvest it where they could. And so that affected cave systems, it affected summer roosting habitat. Same is true today. I mean, we have that problem now. There's development everywhere, especially in the Nashville area, down in Houston. Memphis has had quite a bit with some of the more developments. And we'll talk about how those things are protected now, but habitat loss is still an ongoing thing. But the biggest thing is going to be impacts to the hibernacula. All right, so the caves. Gates and other structures over cave entrances restrict bat flight and cause changes in airflow and internal temperatures, but are also a necessary evil because of white nose syndrome. So white nose syndrome is a fungal disease caused by P. destructans, or is formerly Geomyces destructans. It was originally, I guess this fungus was originally identified in 2009, and when it was backtraced through different people that were splunking and taking pictures of bats, they were able to determine that it originated in New York in 2006. It is a European type fungus, so somebody probably brought it over from splunking, didn't clean their clothes, got into the cave system here, and it just thrived. But it is a fungus that grows on the bat's face. So it's killed greater than 6.7 million bats since the arrival in 2006. Got a little story about that. I was doing work at Russell Cave National Monument. This has been the summer of 2009. And we caught a gray bat there. First time they've ever had a gray bat that far south. And so they decided to do a cave survey, go through the whole cave system and count bats. And I think we were at like 3,200 bats in 2000. I think it was 2010 when they did the survey. And they would come back every year, and white nose finally hit that cave. And each year there was a 25% reduction. I don't know what the current number is, but I remember the last year that I was involved, that was 300 bats. So they went from 3,200 to 300. And how that works, how is white nose killing off 70 to 90% of these bats, or sometimes even 100%, is this fungus grows on their face. All right, and so before I go much further, let's do poll 8, Natalie, if you don't mind. So are bats true hibernators? Yes or no?
Gonna close out the poll here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
True hibernators. Ooh, we actually got a wrong one here. So those that answered yes, you are correct. Bats are true hibernators. All right, so I'm going to explain to you hibernation, an animal going into a deep sleep, all right, through the winter time. I want you to think about insect-eating bats. So this white nose syndrome grows on their face. All right, and it grows slowly. So as we go through the winter, they've gone into hibernation. They're sleeping. They don't plan to wake up, because what happens if they wake up? Well, they eat insects. Are insects out during the winter? No. So this fungus is kind of like having a cold, a bad sinus infection. You know, when you're so stopped up at night that you wake up and have to go blow your nose or find something so you can go back to sleep. When it does this to a bat and they wake up, what do you think happens? They fly out trying to find food, fly out of that cave. It's cold. There's no food. And so these bats die off in mass numbers. And so outside of the caves, outside different entrance and exit holes, you'd find hundreds of bats just on the ground, dead. And so bats are true hibernators. And everybody's like, well, I always like asking this question: are bears true hibernators? So based on what I just told you, think about that. Bears are not true hibernators. They go into torpor, which is also a deep sleep. But what can bears do that bats don't do? If a bear were to wake up, is it going to find food? Absolutely. It could go kill a raccoon. It could kill a possum. It could go get fish and go right back to sleep. Bats can't do that. Therefore, bats die. That's why they're made to hibernate through the entire winter. Bears are made to sleep deep, but if they woke up and they were hungry, they could get food. So bats are true hibernators. There's another picture. You see all the white on their nose. So 12 bat species, okay, out of the 47 in the U.S. are affected by white nose. There's also an additional 9 species that are known to be carriers. So research has shown that some bats aren't affected. They're not affected like this, but they can carry that white nose and transfer it to other bats. And the way they transfer it is by touch. They all roost together. All right, you'll see some pictures in a minute of a bat house. You'll see how many can really roost together. It doesn't take much to transfer this disease. All right, so spread by touch. There's no cure. What was that? Was that 2012? I know there's a lot of different biological, chemical, immunological, mechanical things that are going on as far as testing and seeing what works on bats, including genetic manipulation, trying to see, what gene does that affect? Is there a way to make it where they don't have a reaction to this fungal disease? But some of the biological and chemical stuff, biological meaning that, giving them vitamins and different enzymes and stuff, trying to apply that to a large number of bats, since you can have thousands in the cave system, is risky, including the chemical side. Introducing chemicals in the cave system is catastrophic, could be catastrophic to the cave environment itself, because the cave environment is its own ecosystem. So therefore, it's very limited on what can be done. You can't go to each bat and swab each nose to clean each bat. It would take forever. And by the time they heal, they'd probably get it again. So right now, there is no cure for white nose syndrome. I will tell you, we're talking about the tricolored bat being listed. The little brown bat, I noticed this summer, every state I went to was asking us to collect data on little brown bats. And so little brown bat is taking a huge hit. And I think they said 2026, it's probably going to be listed as threatened. So it's the next one coming down the pipeline that's going to be listed as threatened and endangered. So I'm going to show you this map. I always found it interesting. The X on the map is where white nose originated here in the U.S. I want you to pay attention to the video. I'm going to play it. If you type in whitenosesyndrome.org, you can find this map and look at it all you want. I want you to watch it, how it expands. Okay, so we go from white being the longest, the oldest occurrences, to light blue, to dark blue, to yellow, orange, and then red being the most recent occurrences. And I want you to watch how it goes across the U.S., but in particular, pay attention to Memphis. And we're going to talk about why it's so different than some of the rest of the U.S. So slowly make its way west, and then there you go. It jumps to Washington that year. All right, I'm going to take you to the end of this so I can show. Oh, right there. All right, so red being the most recent. So we saw this jump somewhere probably 2015, I believe. It jumped to Washington. A lot of people, how'd that happen? Well, somebody probably was splunking and didn't clean their clothes and decontaminate, probably flew to Washington, and there you go. It starts spreading from there. Well, how does it jump to all these different areas? Same thing. People don't clean their clothes when they go to cave systems, or had an occurrence with a bat that had white nose syndrome, and it just spreads from there. So if you look at these age ranges, let's see, 2006 to 2011, it spread from New York to pretty much the eastern U.S. But what's unique is you look at the rest of Middle and East Tennessee, it's almost an occurrence in every county, especially those more rural where there's more cave systems. But this fine line where West Tennessee meets Middle Tennessee is the Tennessee River. And when you get west of that, you hit the Mississippi alluvial plain. And what do we have there? Just forest, no caves. Same thing going west all the way to the Ozarks. So you can kind of see this Mississippi Delta not having really many occurrences. We do have some down here in Mississippi where we do get some of the tail ends of the Appalachians still. We still get some karst terrain pop in. A lot of deeper river systems that have large culverts. We're finding out that tricolored bats and northern long-eareds love to hang out in those, and a culvert can function as a mini cave system. So we're starting to see more of those. But it's astonishing to me just how fast something like that can spread to such a small species. All right. So how are bats protected? All right, so federal and state legislation. So the Endangered Species Act of 1973 is our current Endangered Species Act. It's what protects at the federal level all the species that we just talked about. But at the state level, we have the Tennessee Non-Game and Endangered or Threatened Wildlife Species Conservation Act of 1974. So not long after Endangered Species Act was enacted, Tennessee implemented their own. So in the state of Tennessee, it's split into two things. We have the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, which usually handles all the water resources. So if somebody's developing and impacts a wetland or stream, you go through them for a permit. They also have a division of natural areas that handles the plant species, state listed plant species in Tennessee. So TDEC DNA handles plant species, and TWRA, or Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, so anybody that hunts and fishes knows all about them. You got to have a permit through them to hunt and fish. But they also regulate the state listed animal species. So when we go through and do these surveys, we have to coordinate with those separate entities, and then also at the federal level with whatever agency's in charge. It varies. It can be the Corps of Engineers. It can be Fish and Wildlife. It depends on what kind of permits are required. But developmental projects that can cause harm or impact to a species or species habitat, we're going to walk through, because I do a lot of developmental projects, we're going to walk through how that works and how this factors in, how bats factor into a development project. All right, so let's say developers come in and they got engineered plans to build something. They have to go through their due diligence from the environmental side, through water resources, through threatened endangered species, cultural, a whole array of things. And if there's a nexus, a federal nexus, when I say federal nexus, that means either the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has taken jurisdiction over a stream. They say they're going to take jurisdiction over it. Or let's say that it's National Historic Places has a Indian mound or something that they regulate. Then that agency would take charge over the federal coordination for that project. And from a federal standpoint, that agency has to go through all the hoops. It has to go through Section 106, which is cultural resources. It's got to go through the Endangered Species Act. It has to check all these boxes for these projects. And so one of those is the Endangered Species Act. And so what you have to do in order to get clearance to say that, hey, this project's not going to affect any bats, a habitat assessment has to be performed to determine if suitable habitat is there. At this point in time, if it's forested, it used to be if there were shagbark hickories or exfoliating bark or dead tree snags, then that was suitable. And if it wasn't that, it wasn't suitable. Now we've gotten to the point that habitat assessment is almost, I want to say it's almost pointless, but mature forest, even some, early growth forests are considered suitable now. But field habitat, scrub, shrub, not suitable. So habitat assessments now, if you got trees on your property, you might as well assume that there's bat habitat there. What happens next? If there's suitable habitat present, that developer has the options. They can either avoid all the suitable habitat. So if they got a property that's half field, half forest, they can avoid all the forest and just build in the field. The other thing they can do, when you have that federal nexus, is start a formal consultation with Fish and Wildlife Service. So what I do is I do that habitat assessment. I go to Fish and Wildlife. They pull up whatever data they have in relation to the project site. They pull up whatever data they have in relation to the project site. They pull up whatever data they have in relation to the project site. They pull up whatever data they have in relation to the project site. They pull up whatever data they have in relation to the project site. They pull up whatever data they have And they'll say, yes, we believe you need to do a misnet survey, or hey, acoustics may be enough. So what happens next is we conduct a misnetting or acoustic sampling survey, and there's certain requirements on the amount of sampling effort that you have to put forth. So clients usually have a choice to do acoustic sampling or do misnetting. I always try to push my clients to do misnetting, because if you get it on acoustic sampling, if you get a call that's endangered or threatened bat, you have to go do misnetting. So we kind of most of the time bypass acoustics and just go out there, misnet, and try to capture those bats. If you don't capture anything that's threatened or endangered, we catch all kinds of species all the time. But if it's not threatened or endangered, then what goes to next is no impact, so not likely to adversely affect if there's no threatened endangered species. If you're within a range or even a certain mileage from a known maternity roost or things like that, sometimes you can't do anything. But most of the time, there's a time of year restriction, which means that you cannot clear trees from April 1st to November 14th. Okay, so that's when bats are leaving those cave systems. That's when bats are being active, utilizing summer habitat. Um, and so you have to clear when it's after November 14th to May 1st. And what that does is all of our endangered species, most of them are cave-dwelling bat species, so they're not going to be in those forests. And more of our more generalist species can go to clear trees, they'll move to another forest and stand. Of course, that's being reevaluated now that tricolored bat is known to utilize both, and it's on the list to be endangered. So I'm interested to see how regulations change moving forward. I've noticed they've gotten more strict since 2006, which is good, because it was pretty lax for a while. So I'm interested to see how this moves forward in protection wise. So how are bats studied? So just give you kind of a quick overview. We talk about misnets. These are misnet systems. This one on the top left is a triple high system, so it goes up to 30 feet. And the one on the bottom right is a double net system. It can hold two nets. It can hold one. They go to about 20 feet. I rigged up this system here using pull handles, telescoping pull handles. They go to about 24 feet. So you can raise and lower it really easy. This one here's got a pulley system. So here's an example of that triple high, with somebody standing next to it, and kind of get an idea of how big the system is. Having pulleys on it definitely saves on work. This was in Indiana. This site was hot. I think we caught 30 something big brown bats. I mean, this is prime. We got a nice little stream. There were so many mosquitoes. You got some edge habitat here next to a field. You got a culvert. I mean, you couldn't ask for better conditions for catching bats. Same on this one, pretty snaky, but good habitat, lots of bugs, nice open flyway that you can set these nets up into. So we set these nets up across these flyways, bats funnel into them. Now you're probably asking, well, can't they detect the misnet? Well, it's called a misnet for a reason. It's so fine that those high frequency sound waves pass through the net, and so they can't detect it. Now, if I had a bug tangled up in the net and it's moving, that bat may avoid that net because it can detect that movement. So we check these every 10 to 15 minutes. Usually starting at dusk and go to 1, 2 a.m., sometimes 3, depending on how many bats we're catching. So checking them every 15 minutes, making sure there's no leaves or bugs in them. So that way we increase the probability of catching a bat. When it comes to cave systems, you also can use harp nets. Harp nets are unique. They have this baffle bag at the bottom, and they got multiple fishing line strings going like a harp going up and down. And what you do is you set these across the cave entrance. You can see where we put some brush to cover up some of the holes. And now you do this before dusk, because at dusk, bats just come barreling out of that cave. And as you can see here in this baffle bag, there's probably, you can't see the other side, but I think I remember this night was about 400 bats in here. And we spent all night banding and identifying and taking data. And they were all gray bats. So if we caught a threatened endangered bat, we band it, note the species, and we can put a tracker on it, radio telemetry tracker. And what you do is you can glue that to its back with, a surgical type adhesive that will fall off, within 7 days. And you can go track these bats and find out where they're staying. We know they utilize caves. Some bats have a certain roost they go to every summer. You can find out where that is. You can section it off and protect it. So telemetry tracking is a big one, especially going forward. I think it's going to be utilized more to track these bats. Little video here kind of showing how a bat is handled when it's caught in a mist net. You'll see how fine this net is. You can actually hear the bat click too at a frequency you can hear. You see, just chewing away at my finger. So once we capture a bat, we bring it back, usually at the back of a truck, or we're out in the field, and we start collecting data. There's various things that we collect. Besides identifying the species, we make sure we get some good profile pics of the back, so we can show the fur color, pics of the cow car and its feet, any toe hairs. But we record species, age, sex, reproductive status, so whether or not they're lactating, if the testes are distended, arm length, note the cow car, ear length, tail length, any wing damage, any sign of white nose syndrome, that kind of thing. And then we can choose to ban or not ban depending on what the state wants to do, and then we release them. And so this is just a straight up presence absence survey and collecting data.
Hey, Chris, I want to give you a heads up on the time. It's 7:40.
Right. Yeah, we're wrapping up right now. So what can you do to help? So avoid entering protected caves or caves that are known to house bats. A lot of cave systems now are barred off or have notifications on them. You can build a bat house, a big thing here in Memphis. We do a lot of this with Wolf River, and Wolf River does a really good job of getting these out on a lot of the greenways, but they attract big browns, eastern reds, tricolored evenings, little longered Indiana bats. A lot of good information out on the web. Bat Conservation International probably has some of the best. I know Kathy likes to order bat houses from Habitat for Bats, which has got really good bat houses. Of course, placement is key. Sides of houses and barns are good. Never put a bat house on a tree. Bat houses are relatively big, anywhere from 2 feet wide to 4 feet tall. They can be pretty big and near some water. Kind of idea, some bat houses here. So a single chamber bat house, which is just one of these slots, can hold 100 bats. This is a 5-chamber bat house, so there can be up to 500 bats. And not particular to any one species. Species intermingle when they're in the roosting. You can see this red bat in here amongst all these big browns, so they're not particular about who they are sleeping next to, but this is exactly why white nose syndrome can spread fast. They're really close together. Some good pictures of some volunteer work that FedEx, I know they do a lot with Wolf River, but these are some bat houses that were put out on, I think it's Kennedy Park, was Epping Way. I don't remember, but we put some out there. And of course, community involvement. So Wolf River Conservancy is a good start. There's some Tennessee and Mississippi bat working groups, local schools. I could go to a lot of talks for them, and Boy and Girl Scouts and different educational programs. We do talks to interact with kids. And that's it. I appreciate y'all listening to this talk. I know it's a little long. I try to be more detailed when I'm speaking to adults, especially on a webinar. But if you got any questions, Kathy, I don't know how we do that. I guess you're moderating. So, yeah, feel free to ask them.
Chris, that was just fantastic. I'm going to start with one as I pull this box up, and that is, why shouldn't we put bat houses on trees?
Okay, so trees are more shaded, all right? And trees are going to be the natural thing that bats want to go to. But as far as protecting bats, putting a bat house on a tree does not provide the optimal temperature that bats love to sleep at, okay? So eastern red bats love to hang in trees. Other bats love to get underneath bark. But if you provide a habitat, so a bat house, whether it's on the side of a barn, the side of your house, if it's on a pole, it needs 10 to 12 hours of sun, okay? And that's going to put that temperature up in the 90 to 100 degree range, which is more preferential for a bat. So bats don't just crawl anywhere on a tree. They crawl up under that side of the tree that gets the most sun. All right, so by providing a bat house that's out away from the tree line, that's in its own thing that gets the sun, is going to be more suitable to what a bat wants to sleep in during the day. Now, putting them on a bat house on a tree in general is also opens up problems with predators, so raccoons, possums, owls. It's gonna be a problem no matter what you do. But yeah, trees is too shaded is the key. Temperature is key.
Okay, well, you just answered part of this next question, which is, what are the requirements for setting up a bat box? I've had a I'm not sure what this means. I have had a 300 bat box up for 5 years and 0 bats thus far.
Yeah. So a lot of people ask, well, what can I do to attract them? You can't do anything. I mean, it's going to be location. It's like buying a house. Location, location, location. I don't know where you live, but having water nearby. So whether you're in a neighborhood, I mean, we have a lot of bat houses here in East Memphis. We put all the ones up at Sea Isle. All the ones at Sea Isle have bats, but you know, a lot people have pools. That counts. Anybody's got standing water, whether it's a pond or a pool or a stream. So getting out in the more rural areas of Memphis, if you have water within a quarter mile, is ideal. It also depends on the placement of your bat house. If it's mounted where it gets a lot of shade, you're not going to get any bats. Height matters. If it's on like an 8-foot pole, it's not high enough. It really needs to be in the 12 to even 20-foot range. That's why sides of houses and barns are great, but you want to make sure they can't get into the barn or attic of your house. So temperature, water, and height.
Okay. Great. Okay, let's see. I was out doing a bat working group. I was told there are apps to listen for bats. We're talking about this. Is there one the public can use?
All right, say that one more time. You skipped out.
I was out doing, she was out, or this person was out working with a working group, a bat working group, and was told there are apps to listen for bats. Is there one the public can use?
Well, when I say there's apps, it costs money. I mean, the bat stuff, they make an attachment that goes on your phone because you can't just use the phone. It won't pick up that high of a frequency, but Sonobat and Wildlife Acoustic sell a adapter. It plugs in on the end of your phone, like where your charging jack is, and you can download their app, and it'll record. And I mean, not record. It'll listen live, like the Merlin ID app, the Bird app, and it'll tell you what's in the area. Now, you got to keep in mind it's on a probability basis, so it has to hit 90% or more for it to even tell you what the bat is. It's a little not as technical as the ones we use because we record and collect everything. This won't keep the data. It'll just tell you what's in the areas it flies by. And those things, they do a decent job, but the bat really does have to fly within like 100-foot radius for it to really record.
Okay.
Whereas some of the equipment we have, they can be within 300 meters and it'll record.
All right, here's the next question. What do we do with a bat found on the ground?
Well, first thing you do, you can call me. If it's alive, I wouldn't touch it. I've never run into a rabid bat. As many bats as I've handled, even the sick ones, most of the time they're dehydrated. You can use a towel and pick it up, put it in a box. And Mississippi Wildlife is a good person to call. I mean, they can always call you guys at Wolf River. I mean, y'all know to call me. I don't mind coming to get it. You can email me at this email address if you want. There's not many people that handle bats, and then really there's not much you can do, especially if you find a baby bat, one that's hairless, it's gonna die. It's the odds of saving it are slim because mimicking bat milk is very hard to do. I've never had luck saving a baby bat, but if you find one on the ground and you want to get it off the ground, use a towel, scoop it up, put it in a box, and then call somebody. You can call TWA if you want to.
Yeah, I would say, and I would not let kids pick up bats.
No.
Okay, so next question. Chris, thank you so much for educating us about bats. I've heard you numerous times at Strawberry Plains and the zoo and here and learned so much. Bats are lucky to have you. So that's not a question, but thanks, Dee Dee.
Thank you.
That's
I appreciate it, Steve.
Dee Dee Perel. Okay. And then here's our next question. I'm very interested in having one or more bat houses. Our property has hawks. There is a 1-acre property, but a field and trees. Bats seem to be in our yard and at our swimming pool. We don't see them now at dusk. Any ideas?
Oh, you talking about like now at dusk? Like now, or are we talking like during the summer? Because like right now, you're not gonna bats are when August hits, bats start declining quickly. They start going and working on hibernation, and they're feeding and going to sleep. So I mean, a couple more weeks, you're not going to see a single bat. It'd be hard to find one right now unless you're down in like Louisiana. But if you're talking about during the summer months, hawks are, especially at dusk, if hawks are out, can be a deterrent to bats. I mean, it's just like an owl. I mean, they can attack them. But you got the prime habitat. You got a pool. And they're obviously out there feeding during the summer. They love pool water. I don't know why. But if you have a field and some forest, you can get 16-foot. Where do we get those, Kathy? Was that at Lowe's? I know Germantown Lumber
Yeah, we got
carries.
them at that one time. Yeah.
Yeah, you can special order 16, even to 20-foot poles, but I'd get a big one. You can mount a house on it and put it out, 30 feet off a tree line in a field that gets sun, somewhere near your pool, and I give it a year, and I imagine you get some bats. I mean, that's some prime conditions. Having a pool is helpful, especially if you got sun.
Mhm.
But outside of that, I would say that the hawks are probably deadering bats.
Yeah. How do you see climate change impacting bat behavior, and how can we as a society help them adapt? Good question.
That is a good question. I don't necessarily see climate change as the problem. I think the focus needs to be more on development, habitat destruction. I mean, anthropogenic impact alone is the problem. I mean, I know a lot of people view that as being linked to climate change. I don't necessarily share the same opinion when it comes to climate change. But in regards to bats, I think the immediate concern is the amount of development that goes on and restricted regulations in regard to that development.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that is the end of our questions that were submitted. That was really great, Chris. I've watched this talk evolve over the years, and it's just
It's definitely evolved.
you keep tweaking it, and it was really good.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So thank you very much. I'm going to thank everyone for coming and turn it back over to Eric, our CEO. I'll see you soon, Chris.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Kathy. Chris, awesome presentation. I know this is one of the most anticipated ones of the year. It's a great seasonal talk as we're close to Halloween, and I know that a lot of folks were really looking forward to this. So thank you for joining us tonight.
You're welcome.
I thought it was fantastic. We had a very active text thread amongst the staff that were really enjoying some of the different things. So awesome presentation. And folks, if you are interested more in the work of the Wolf River Conservancy, please visit our website, wolfriver.org, and check out our calendar function. We've got a lot of amazing events coming up that you'll want to make sure you're a part of. So with that, I want to thank Chris again. Thank you to the team for putting this together. And everyone have a great night.